Hey friends, welcome back to another episode of Manly Made Minutes Monday Moment, where I share tips, tricks, and helpful hints. Today, I want to share one simple little tip that works for me when I'm using my paper trimmer and trying to line up on the line, middle of the line. Where on the line do you line up to make consistent cuts? Then I just want to share one little tip that I use when I'm cutting out a full panel to go on the full cover of an A2 size card, just to make sure that I never have that always problem of when you cut it, then you always got a little, around the edge that I still need to cut off, even though I measured it to size, just because that can change just slightly. And so I want to share the one little tip that I do when I cut that full panel. So let's get started. I want to go to my down cam and show you on my Fiskars trimmer, and I've got a pink piece of paper so that hopefully you can see this. I'll zoom in on that down cam nice and close so you can see those lines. So let's get started. Okay, here is my Fiskars trimmer. This is the only trimmer that I own. I'll eventually invest in more, but this one works for me just fantastic for now. This one does have an extender if you're measuring, 12 by 12s, larger sheets of paper to line up, with your alignment here. So since I'm zoomed in on this, you can see that I've got some thinner lines, and then right on the inch marks, it's a little bit of a thicker line. And this is what I do every single time to make sure that I have a consistent cut, especially when I'm doing, different cuts on, same cuts on like a different card. So I'm going to go just to this 3-inch mark. Actually, we'll cut a panel out of this because I want to show you what I do for a full-size panel at the same time. So if I have a 5.5 by 4.25 A2 size card, and I just want to cut a full panel to use on that, I cheat myself just a tiny, tiny, tiny bit so that it stays just slightly within that size of that panel. If I cut on 5.5 and 4.25, sometimes, almost always, it seems like I have just a little bit of hangover, and not from drinking, by the way, slightly little bit of hangover that I always have to trim off. So I just started cheating. Before I cut this, we'll line it up. I'll show you what I mean by that. Then I'm going to show you how I line up when I'm cutting out other things. So if I go to my 5.5, 5, and then 5.5, the other little bit more solid line here. When I line this up, if I line it up on that line, I always seem to have just that slight hangover. So I cheat myself, not quite to the 1/16, but almost in between that 1/16 and that 5.5. So I just leave a sliver of space there, not right to that line. Then I cut to that. So hopefully if I zoom in on the camera close enough here, you can see that I've got that slight sliver. Okay, then I would turn, after I cut it, I'm going to turn this and cut this at 4.25. So 4, 4.5, 4.25. There's my 16th. I'm going to go slightly between that 16th and 4.25. Slightly. It's a tiny sliver, and cut there. That's what I do for my full panels, just so that I have I don't care if I actually have a tiny, tiny white edge around on my full panel. I would prefer that personally. Personal preference, I would prefer that. I just sometimes don't like it when it goes to the full edge anyway. If I'm going to go to full edge, I would probably cut to size and then and then go from there. Okay, now let's just show you how I line up. I'm going to go to the 4-inch mark here. Now, on the inch, it's a slightly thicker line. So if I line up right before the line, so I put my piece of paper just so that the edge of the paper is touching the edge of that 4. Okay, now when I look at this, I can still see that full line, that full solid line at the full 4-inch mark. But I could also cut this and line this up the edge of the paper. So I'm going to back up. 4 is right here. I could line the edge of this paper right to the middle of that line and cut there. All right. Now, last option, we'll back off again. 4-inch mark, solid line. I could line this edge of the paper to the outside edge of that 4 and cut there. So you're going to have less than a 1/16 of an inch, right? But it's going to be a slight sliver difference of where you cut. You're going to get a little different size. Then this is where we end up getting out our big, you know, Tim Holtz 9-inch scissors and trimming that down some, right? And then we always just have a little hair piece of paper we have to trim off. This is probably why. When I do mine, I'm going to back off this 4, I always line my edge of my paper to this edge, like this edge of that solid line, not the middle and not this edge. I line it up on this edge. So I'm going to go right up to the line where I can see that solid black line still, but my paper is touching the edge of that line. That's where I cut. Every card I cut, this is how I cut it. So I cheat myself just a sliver to alleviate extra little trimming as much as possible. I still end up with it, trust me. But that's where I line mine up. You do what works for you, but there's, you know, technically on each line, I have 3 spots I can line this up. My right edge, if I'm facing my trimmer, my right edge, my left edge, and right down the middle. Now, if you look at these other lines in between the halves, they're just a little smaller, not as thick, but I still do the same. So now let's go to 4 1/4. I could still line this up right on the edge of that line, and I can see the line. I can back off again, 4 1/4. I could still line up to center of that line because I can still tiny bit see that line, the half of the line, or just go a little further just past that line and cut there. Okay, this is why I always line up. If I'm facing my trimmer, I line up to the right edge of that line every time, because then I can still see the line, like this one here. I'm on the right edge of this 4 1/4, but I can still see the line just hugging the edge of my paper. And that's where I cut my pieces of paper. Hope this helps. You know, obviously I would put this down, trim it to hold this in place. But I'm just talking about lining up either on the right side of this line, down the middle of this line, or on the left side of that line. I would do the same thing out here on my extender. If I've got a 12 by 12, we'll just use this up at the top edge here. Now, if I'm going to cut my 12 by 12 down to 10, you can see that 10, same thing. It's slightly thicker, right? So I would line this to the right edge of that line. I can see that black line hugging and touching the edge of my paper. That's where I would cut. I can do it again and line up to the middle of that line so I can still see just a little bit of black hugging my piece of paper and cut there. Or I'll line it up to the left edge of that line where I can't see any of the line, and I just go past until that line disappears, hold, and cut there. All right? There is my Monday moment for you. I'll let you show my pretty face again, and we're going to finish this one out. Okay, I hope this little tip helped you. Does it make a difference? Maybe, maybe not. I just thought I'd show you what works for me. I noticed when I started making cards and lining this up that I was like, oh, the lines are a little thicker. Like if I line it here, I started to end up having little tiny slivers of like a hair sliver, right, sometimes, of trimming. So I just thought, here's how I line up on my trimmer. This is what works for me. I will put a link in my comments on the Fiskars trimmer that I use, and then the blades that I end up having for my replacements. And this is just what works for me. Thank you so much. If you are coming back to my channel, welcome back, and I'm so happy you're coming back for my Monday Moments. If you are new here, or if those of you watching have not done so yet, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. I have a Monday Moment where I share tips, tricks, and helpful hints every Monday. I have Scrappy Shorts that comes out every other Saturday, where I use up my scraps and show you different ideas on what you can do with your scraps. And of course, I like to throw in a card video once or twice a week week in there and make a card. So welcome for those of you that are coming back, and please sign up, and until next time, I will see you then.